We make purchases every day. Some are small and meaningless, while others take a lot of thought and consideration. But the things we buy say a lot about our personality. If you see a shirt for $50, you may easily walk past it and go spend that same $50 on some food at a diner down the street. Another person may see that $50 shirt, buy it, and then go home and eat the food in the fridge. Now, let's say on a different day, you spill something on that shirt and that was ruined. The next time you see that $50 shirt, you may purchase it with no hesitation. So what changed? It wasn't the shirt, or the price, or the store, or you. So what changed? It was the circumstance that changed. It was the circumstance that changed the value of the shirt. It was the way you viewed that situation in that moment. Or in other words, the value of the shirt outweighed the lack of money. But see, that's the easiest scenario to make a decision in. The decision almost makes itself. In this case, the price doesn't matter. And the price never matters when the value is greater. You may not feel like buying a car because there's public transit. But the second you move to a city and there are no buses, there are no trains, then the value of having a car immediately increases. You may not be able to afford medical bills, but the second your child is in need and is sick, then you'll do whatever you can to come up with that money. That's the easier scenario. The harder decision to make is when two things hold the same value, but you still need to make a decision. Let's go back to that same $50 and the same shirt, but this time it's not one shirt but two. You have the money, but the issue is you can only leave with one. One shirt you like, but you know your parents won't approve. The other shirt you like a whole lot less, but at least your parents won't have an issue with it. In a way, they have equal value, but you still have a decision to make. You can't sit there all day. Eventually the store will close, and you will have to make a choice on what to walk away with. We find ourselves in the same position whenever God gives us instructions. But not following his instructions comes at a cost. In both the physical and the spiritual, we know the price of many things, but not the cost. We have a good understanding of what we can afford based on the price of things, but we don't understand the cost or the sacrifice we'll have to make. Now, the word price in the scriptures is kesef, meaning money, price, shekels, talents. It's the amount of money expected, required, or given as a payment for something. It can be found in Genesis chapter 23, verse 13. I give the price of the field, accept it from me, that I may bury my dead there. My Lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver? What is that between you and me? Bury your dead. This is the price that's simply referring to what's on the tag. The field is worth 400 shekels, so I got that here. Take that, I'll pay you, and I'll be on my way. That's the transactional price, no feelings involved. But in verse 15, it'll start to hint at what we'll get into later, that the value of a thing is deeper than what's on the price tag. For it says, a piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What's that between you and me? If our relationship is worth more than this field, then I'm going to refuse to let that get in between you and I. If you need to bury your dead, then that's much more important. So why would I let that get in between us? You see, when a relationship is real, you don't let small things get in between it. It's like when my brothers and I were in college. We didn't always have the money individually, but collectively somebody had it. So if I ask if you want to get something to eat, I'm not asking if you have money or not. I'm asking if you're hungry. And if I got the money, I got you, because I know when it comes back around that you'll have me as well. And that's the relationship we had and still have to this day, because the price of a thing is nothing in comparison to how much we value each other. Now, if that's the price, then what's the cost? Now, the Old Testament doesn't give an exact definition of cost, but it does give us some wording that gives us clues about what cost means. In the scriptures, it does say to cost nothing. And that word in the Hebrew is hanam, which means devoid of cost, or literally to cost nothing. And then there's the word free. And in Hebrew, that word is hain, which means favor, grace, or charm. So in this definition of the word free, it doesn't mean that there was no price. It means that it didn't cost you anything because the favor that is on your life or the relationship you had with the person that had the thing you wanted. You see, when the grace of God is on your life, people will question and wonder how you were able to have the funds or get the things that you know you didn't have the money for. How you're able to get a job you didn't qualify for. How you're able to get things that cost them so much but cost you nothing. But it's because of the grace and the favor that's on your life. Because having a relationship with him and having his grace and his favor means so much more than any material thing that we can have on this earth. Now, the Webster's definition of cost is the effort or sacrifice made to achieve something. So it's not just financial. It's the loss or penalty that happens when gaining something. For many of us, what we're giving up is better than what we're gaining. We give up a dream body for a sweet treat or a burger. We give up a passing grade for a night out to party. You give up a marriage for a one-night stand. Or if we go deeper, some of us have given up our salvation for compromise and comfort. For some of us, our understanding of life has cost us our eternity. And I pray that today we wake up and realize what our current lifestyle is costing us. Because we're all trying to make it in some way. We're all after some type of prize. But if the cost outweighs the prize, then it's from the enemy. And if the prize outweighs the cost, then it's from God. The issue is that some of us don't have the proper discernment to realize what's good for us or not. Our palates are so used to the junk food of the world that we don't even recognize what's healthy and godly. So much so that we reject it. You're sabotaging your own future because you look at health as control. You look at health as boring. You look at health as suffocating. When truly it's removing and extracting the pollution that you've been breathing in for so long. Your rejection of health can cost you your life. And some of you have such a calling on your life that it won't only cost you your life, but the life of those around you. But for all of us, you must know that the decisions that you make don't just affect you, but all of the generations to follow. In Joshua chapter 6, verse 26, it says, Joshua laid an oath on them at that time, saying, Cursed before the Lord is the man who rises up and rebuilds the city Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn shall he lay its foundation, and at the cost of his youngest son shall he set up his gates. You see, Israel was promised the land by God. And God is a promise-keeping, covenant-keeping God who sees to it that what he says and what he promises will come to pass. So anybody that tries to come against that now or in the future has to reap the consequences of the thing that God tried to establish in your life. Because in 2 Thessalonians 3 it says, But the Lord is faithful. He will establish you and keep you against the evil one. And in Psalms 138 verse 7 it says, Though I walk in the midst of trouble, you preserve my life. You stretched out your hand against the hand of my enemies, and your right hand delivers me. So what God is saying in these verses is simple. If anyone comes against my children, then it will cost them greatly. At the point in which someone tries to go against what God tried to establish in your life, they are sacrificing something in their life whether they know it or not. Going against God will cost you more than you anticipate because you don't know everything you're up against. God doesn't reveal everything to anybody, especially not our enemies. It's like going to get that apartment that only showed its monthly price, but then when you go to apply, they pull back the veil. Not only is it a monthly fee, but there's a deposit, the application fee, the broker's fee, utilities, internet, pest control, and a handful of other things that may not even be real charges, but who knows? It looked good on the surface, but it cost you more than you anticipated. It's like being at war, and you see your enemy across the field and they seem vulnerable, or non-combative, or exposed. It seems as if there's a clear shot to kill, and an easy opportunity to get an advantage in the battle. So you step out into the field towards the enemy, you and all your troops. Your heart is racing over the thought of victory, and then all of a sudden, boom, you hear an explosion behind you, and then boom, there's another explosion to your right, and you see your fellow soldier flying in the air after triggering a landmine explosion. And as the landmines are triggered one after another, you hear another sound in front of you, and you realize it's the war cry of the enemy who was not at all exposed, but was waiting on you to fall into their trap. So now the vulnerable one is you. What seemed like an easy victory ended up costing lives. So we need to be careful not to put our hand on something to remove what God established. We need to be careful not to think that we know more than God and try to order our own steps. We cannot walk through the valley of the shadow of death if God is not with there as we go through it. He must be the one ordering our steps as we go through the valley, or else we run the risk of not making it to the other side. That's why we need to know the difference between price and cost. We need to figure it out before it's too late. For the fruit in the garden was free for Adam to eat. There was no price. But what did it cost him? It cost him his innocence, causing him to feel naked and ashamed. It cost him his comfort of living, causing him to gather food by the sweat of his brow. It cost him the daily and direct communion he had with God. So what are your decisions costing you? Now, there's a third example of cost that's in the scriptures that we need to look at, and it's found in Genesis 34, and that's the bride price. You see, the bride price is a bridal payment, the purchase made for a wife, or the money giving for a wedding. It's a price a man will have to pay to a father to receive his daughter as a wife, to get her hand in marriage. A man could either pay it directly, or he could work it off through labor on the family's property. It's why Jacob worked for Laban for 21 years with hopes of receiving his daughter Rachel as a wife. Those years of working for Laban was Jacob working off the bride price because he didn't have the money. And interestingly enough, now in this scripture, it's Jacob's turn. It's Jacob's turn as a father to determine the bride price for his daughter. In verse 11 it says, Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me I will give. Ask me for as great a bride price as a gift as you will, and I will give whatever you say to me. Only give me the young woman to be my wife. Now this may seem like a simple request because normally it is. Shechem goes to Jacob, who is the daughter of Dinah. This is the woman that Shechem wants to marry. In a normal situation, all Jacob has to do is name his price and Shechem would pay it. But it's not the price that Jacob and his sons are worried about, but it's the cost. So what is that cost? We start to see it earlier in this chapter, starting at verse 1. Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the women of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he seized her and lay with her and humiliated her. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this girl for my wife." Now the first detail we need to see is that Dinah went out to see the women of the land. This may seem like a random and meaningless detail, but it begins to show us in these scriptures an example of a costly decision. Because to go see the women of the land wasn't just a social time to hang out. It was that, but it was also more than that. Jacob and his family lived outside of the main city. Therefore, they weren't used to the ways and the customs and the culture of the nearby major city. So Dinah was leaving the home she grew up in and the city she grew up in to learn the ways and culture of the nearby city. This was not just cultural and geographical, but to go see the woman of the land meant that as she was leaving home, she was also leaving behind the teachings that was taught to her at home. To make this make sense, it's like if you have children and you raise them in the way that they should go, hoping that when they get old, they don't depart from it. But as they experience life and go to school and make friends, it begins to influence them in ways that they would not have been influenced at home. They began to have different taste in food, different accents, different hairstyles, different fashion trends, all things that they would have never learned if they would have just stayed at home. So to say it plainly, Dinah was going into the world and leaving home, but it was also removing her from the protection that she would have had at home with her dad and her brothers there. And we need to point this out because though it doesn't excuse the humiliation that was done to her, it does show us what happens when we put ourselves in environments and situations that we shouldn't be in, that God told us to stay away from. And it shows us what happens when we go against the teachings that we learned at home. So how much more careful should we be to follow the teachings that God gave us? We love to think that God's hand is on us wherever we go, but we truly just take that for granted. Because to keep God's hand on our life, we must follow the instructions to not place ourselves in certain environments and situations. Psalms 91 speaks of God's protection and the falling of our enemies, but that only comes if we listen to the instructions in verse 1. He who dwells in the shelter of the Almighty will abide in the shadow of the Most High. It comes with a condition, and not following that condition comes at a cost. The second thing that we need to point out quickly is that Shechem was the prince of the land. So when he saw her and he wanted her, it wasn't much that anyone could do or say that could go against that. He wasn't the king, but he was the son of a king. So anything that he desired or requested had to be fulfilled without question. So even though Dinah was around other women that should have and could have protected her, it wasn't much that anybody could do about it because he was the prince. And what he said goes. And though Shechem may have done this many times in the past, he may not have received many consequences in those moments. But later we're going to see how this moment is going to cost him so much more than any other moment that may have happened. In verse 4 it says, So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this girl for my wife." Now Shechem had the audacity to harm and humiliate a woman and then asks for her to be his wife. He showed clear disrespect towards her and then thinks he can honor her as a bride. And the way he responds shows us that he still wouldn't respect her, because instead of making a request, he makes a demand and tells his father to get me this girl for my wife. And we see in the verses that Jacob and his sons found out what happened. And if you're any type of man and any woman in your life is mistreated or humiliated to any capacity, then your first reaction, your first response will be to protect her, to retaliate, to harm the person that harmed her. And the last thing you will want to do is to give that woman to the same man that hurt her and humiliated her as his wife. And in the eyes of most people, this is not something you can come back from. And if we love you, it'll be from a far distance. And it most likely won't be giving her to you as a wife. So Shechem is insane for even asking this. In verse 11 it says, Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, "Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me I will give. Ask me for as great a bride price and gift as you will, and I will give whatever you say to me. Only give me the young woman to be my wife." Now again, Shechem was the prince of the land, so he assumed he can get whatever he wanted. And he had the money, so the bride price was not an issue. Whatever the price was, he could have paid it, so it wouldn't have cost him or sacrificed him anything. He was the son of a king, meaning that though there was a price to be made, there wouldn't be any sacrifice on his part, especially not financially. And the price wasn't the issue for Jacob and his sons either, because they cared more about the integrity of their daughter and sister. They cared more about what it would cost them as a family than whatever price Shechem was willing to pay. They could have had more money, more land, more livestock, more food, more servants for labor, but compared to the cost, it wasn't worth it. It would have cost Dinah her integrity and would have cost the family their respect. And since we know that he harmed and humiliated her from the beginning, we have to assume that it would still continue throughout the marriage. So this is not something the family was willing to agree to. But the brothers did agree. Not because this was something that they wanted, but they wanted to use this as an opportunity to collect the cost that Shechem owed them for humiliating and harming their sister. For after they agreed to Shechem, to seem as if they were at peace, the brothers of Jacob used this moment of false security as an opportunity to attack Shechem, his father, and his entire household. In verse 26 it says, they killed Hamor and his son Shechem with the sword, and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. The sons of Shechem came upon the slain and plundered the city, because they had defiled their sister. They took their flocks and their herds, their donkeys, and whatever was in the city and in the field, all their wealth, all their little ones and their wives, all that was in the house, they captured and plundered. So we see that Shechem's actions didn't cost him a single dollar, but it cost him his life. Not only his life, but his father and everyone in his household and their belongings. So what does this tell us? That we need to be careful of the decisions that we make, and we need to make sure to count the cost. We need to be a people that truly leans on the Holy Spirit and let it guide us as we go to make decisions. We have to trust him, because while we can only see a few steps ahead of us, he can see the entire path. On the other side of our disobedience can be a mountain of consequences that we can't see yet. And our disobedience may come at a cost that we aren't ready or willing to pay. So continue to truly remain in the shelter of the Most High by following his voice as you walk through this life, so that you may not lose possession or lose your life, but that you gain more life each and every day. And I pray that whoever is listening to this understands that there is a weight to the decisions that we make. And though our actions may not immediately affect us in the moment, but it can affect us later in life, the generations to follow, and all of those around us. So I pray that you keep the Lord on your mind with everything that you do, and you let his light shine your path with every single step that you take. And remember that I love you, God loves you. Amen.